The screaming cut through the silence at exactly 9:47 p.m., the same as it had every night for 3 weeks. Clara Washington gripped the marble kitchen counter, counting the seconds, waiting for anyone from the Smith family to climb those stairs and stop the sound that tore through her chest like breaking glass. But the mansion swallowed the cries whole, marble and money muffling what should have been impossible to ignore. Clara had only been working at the Smith estate for a month, but she'd already learned the house's rhythms. The way William Smith vanished into his study each evening, bourbon in a crystal tumbler, door locked behind him. The way his wife Catherine swallowed her sleeping pills at exactly 9 p.m., retreating to her bedroom in the east wing, like a ghost returning to her grave. The way the nanny, Miss Patricia Hensworth, somehow never heard little Bryant crying, even though her room sat right next to the nursery. The same instinct that had kept Clara alive in Atlanta's roughest streets was screaming now. Something was very wrong in this house. William Smith moved through his mansion like a king surveying a kingdom built on secrets. Catherine Smith floated to the halls with red-rimmed eyes and trembling hands, never once smiling at her own son. And then there was Ms. Hensworth. The nanny watched everything with the cold precision of someone conducting an experiment, appearing in doorways without sound, her voice sharp as surgical steel. Clara had caught her staring at baby Bryant with something that made her skin crawl. Not love, not even indifference. Something clinical, detached, wrong. Tonight, after 20 minutes of Bryant's screams growing more desperate, more agonized, Clara made a decision that would change everything. She climbed the grand staircase, her worn sneakers silent on carpet, so plush she could hide secrets, past a gallery of Smith family portraits, generations of pale faces staring down with the cold judgment of old money. When she reached the nursery, she found exactly what she found every other time she dared to check. Bryant alone in his designer crib, his face scarlet and soaked with tears, his tiny fists clenched like he was fighting an invisible enemy. "Hey there, sweet baby," Clara whispered, reaching down to lift him. "I got you now." Bryant's cries quieted to hiccups the moment she held him. Clara had 3 nephews back in Atlanta. She knew what babies needed: warmth, touch, someone who cared. Simple things this mansion couldn't buy with all its wealth. As she rocked Bryant gently, she noticed what had been nagging at her for days. His pajama top soaked with sweat, the way he arched his back and pulled away from her touch in certain positions, like something hurt too much to bear. Carefully, Clara laid Bryant on the changing table and lifted his shirt. Her breath stopped. There, spread across his pale stomach, was a pattern of raised welts, angry red marks fresh as wounds, purple bruises fading like old violence. They formed a constellation across his delicate skin, centered around his belly button, spreading toward his ribs like someone had drawn a map of suffering on an innocent child. "Jesus," Clara breathed, her hands shaking as she examined him closer. Bryant whimpered when her fingers came near the marks, confirming what her gut already knew. Someone was hurting this baby. But who? And why? The next morning, Clara tried to tell Catherine. She found the lady of the house in the sunroom, designer teacup in manicure hands, fashion magazine spread across her lap like a shield against reality. "Mrs. Smith, I need to talk to you about Bryant. Last night, Clara, isn't it?" Catherine's voice could have frozen water. "Your duties are housekeeping, not childcare. We employ Ms. Hensworth for Bryant's care. But, ma'am, there are marks on his stomach. He's in pain. That's why he screams every night." Something flickered across Catherine's face. Knowledge, fear, maybe both. Bryant has sensitive skin. Dr. Marlowe monitors the situation closely. Ms. Hensworth applies a prescribed ointment daily. Ointment? Clara's pulse quickened. What kind of ointment causes marks like that? Catherine's eyes went hard as diamonds. "I don't appreciate your tone. You've been here 1 month. Clara, we've been Bryant's parents for 8 months. I think we know what's best for our son." But as Catherine turned back to her magazine, Clara saw it. The woman's hands were shaking. She wasn't defensive. She was terrified. But Clara couldn't just clean. Not when a baby was suffering, and everyone pretended not to notice. Not when every instinct she had screamed that little Bryant was in danger. The truth would destroy the perfect facade of this mansion. And Claire was about to learn that in the Smith house, the most dangerous thing wasn't what you knew. It was what you dared to say out loud. Before we continue this story, I want to ask you something. Where are you watching from right now? What time is it in your city? I love seeing how far these stories reach across the world. And if you're someone who believes that every child deserves protection, that courage matters more than comfort, I invite you to support this channel. Give us a like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Together, we can shine a light on the stories that need to be told. Now, let's continue. Clara's hands were still shaking when the sun rose over the Smith estate that next morning. She'd barely slept, her mind replaying the image of those welts on Bryant's stomach, the sound of his anguished screams, Catherine's terrified eyes. She arrived at the mansion at 6 a.m., earlier than her shift required, but she needed time to think, to plan, to figure out what to do next. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Eleanor Winters, met her at the servants' entrance with a look that could curdle milk. She was a thin, severe woman who'd worked for the Smiths for over 20 years, and she made it clear from day one that Clara was barely tolerated. "You're early," Mrs. Winters said, her tone making it sound like an accusation. "Want to get a head start, ma'am," Clara replied, keeping her voice neutral. "The family values discretion, Clara." Mrs. Winters' eyes narrowed. "Whatever you see in this house, whatever you hear, it stays in this house. Do you understand?" Discretion. That word would haunt Clara for weeks to come. In the kitchen, she found Mrs. Beatrice Washington. No relation, though the shared last name had created an instant if fragile connection. The older black woman had worked as a Smith's cook for 15 years, and her face held the weariness of someone who'd learned to survive by staying invisible. "Morning, baby girl," Mrs. Beatrice said quietly, not looking up from the breakfast she was preparing. Then, even quieter, "I heard you were up in the nursery last night, during your off hours." Clara's stomach tightened. The baby was crying. No one else. "Mind your business." Mrs. Beatrice's voice was sharp as a knife, but her eyes held something else. Fear. That's how you survive in houses like this. You clean what they tell you to clean. You see what they tell you to see. Nothing more. "But Mrs. Beatrice, there are marks on that baby. Someone's hurting." I said, "Mind your business." The older woman's hands trembled as she arranged pastries on a silver platter. "I got 3 grandchildren. Depending on the money I send home every month. You understand what I'm saying? Some fights aren't ours to fight." Clara understood perfectly. She also understood she was alone in this. The mansion transformed in morning light. Sunbeams streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, making the crystal chandeliers throw rainbows across white marble floors. Everything gleamed with the polish of perfection, but Clara saw it differently now. All that beauty was just camouflage, expensive wallpaper covering rot. She found Catherine in the sunroom at 9 a.m., exactly where Mrs. Winters said she'd be. The lady of the house sat in a cream-colored armchair, bone china teacup balanced on her knee, a fashion magazine spread across her lap. Her nails were perfectly manicured, her blonde hair swept into an elegant twist. She looked like she belonged in the magazine she was reading, not actually living in the real world. Clara's heart hammered as she approached. "Mrs. Smith, I need to talk to you about Bryant." Catherine didn't look up. "Clara, isn't it?" Her voice was cool as winter frost. "Your duties are housekeeping, not childcare. We employ Ms. Hensworth for Bryant's care." "But, ma'am, there are marks on his stomach." Clara pushed forward, desperation making her brave. "He's in pain. That's why he screams every night." Something flickered across Catherine's face. Knowledge, fear, maybe both. It was there and gone so fast Clara almost missed it. "Bryant has sensitive skin," Catherine said, her tone clipped and rehearsed. "Dr. Marlowe is monitoring the situation closely. Ms. Hensworth applies a prescribed ointment daily." "Ointment?" Clara's pulse quickened. What kind of ointment causes marks like that? Catherine's magazine crinkled in her grip. "I don't appreciate your tone. You've been here 1 month. Clara, we've been Bryant's parents for 8 months. I think we know what's best for our son." But as Catherine lifted her teacup, Clara saw it. The woman's hands were shaking so badly the cup rattled against the saucer. And in that moment, Clara understood. Catherine wasn't defensive. She was terrified. This wasn't a mother protecting a dangerous secret. This was a trapped woman too frightened to save her own child. "Mrs. Smith," Clara said softly, "if you need help, that will be all." Catherine's voice cracked on the last word. She stood abruptly, magazine falling to the floor, tea sloshing onto her expensive clothes. She didn't seem to notice. "Please return to your duties." Clara watched Catherine retreat upstairs, moving like someone carrying a weight too heavy to bear. Two women, separated by everything, race, class, power, yet both trapped in different cages inside the same terrible house. If Catherine couldn't protect her own son, Clara would have to find someone who could, starting with whoever was really giving those orders, starting with the truth about what was in that ointment. Starting now, that afternoon, when the family departed for Catherine's charity luncheon and William's business meeting, Clara made a choice that could end everything. She stood at the bottom of the grand staircase, watching through the window as the black Mercedes disappeared down the tree-lined driveway. Mrs. Beatrice had gone to the market. The groundskeeper was working on the far edge of the property. Mrs. Winters was in town running errands. For the first time since Clara had started working here, the mansion was truly empty, except for Bryant, sleeping upstairs, and the secrets hidden in Ms. Hensworth's room. Clara's conscience screamed at her with every step up those stairs. She was about to invade someone's privacy, cross a line she couldn't uncross. But then she thought of Bryant's welts, his screams, Catherine's trembling hands. Sometimes doing the right thing meant doing the wrong thing first. Ms. Hensworth's room was at the end of the hall, directly beside the nursery. Clara's hands shook as she turned the handle, half expecting it to be locked. It wasn't. The door swung open silently, revealing a space that somehow felt colder than the rest of the house. Everything was expensive but sterile. A king-size bed with hospital corner sheets. A dresser topped with designer perfume bottles arranged by height. Sleek laptop, leather briefcase, not a single personal photograph. The room belonged to someone who viewed life as a transaction, not an experience. Clara moved quickly to the bathroom, her ears straining for any sound of returning cars. The medicine cabinet held exactly what she expected. Expensive anti-aging creams, high-end cosmetics, prescription bottles with Ms. Hensworth's name. All normal, all legal. Then, pushed to the very back behind a bottle of French moisturizer, she found it. A small amber bottle with no label. Clara pulled it out carefully, unscrewed the cap with trembling fingers. Inside was a thick, clear gel that caught the light strangely, like it was slightly luminescent. She brought it closer, and the smell hit her. Faintly medicinal but wrong, like chemicals mixed with something organic and rotting. This was it. This was what Ms. Hensworth was putting on Bryant's skin. Clara pulled out her phone, photographing the bottle from every angle, making sure to capture the complete absence of any prescription label or pharmaceutical markings. No dosage information. No ingredients list. No doctor's name. Nothing that would make this legal medicine instead of something else entirely. She replaced the bottle exactly as she'd found it, her heart hammering so hard she could hear in her ears. The nursery was her next stop. Bryant lay in his crib, sleeping fitfully, making small sounds of discomfort even in his dreams. Clara's chest tightened. How could anyone hurt something so innocent, so helpless? She moved to Ms. Hensworth's desk, a sleek white table positioned near the window, where the nanny could watch Bryant while working. The drawers were organized with military precision, diapers, wipes, perfectly folded baby clothes. Then, in the bottom drawer beneath a stack of burp cloths, Clara found a leather-bound journal. Her hands shook as she opened it. The first pages were normal, feeding times, diaper changes, sleep schedules, everything a responsible nanny would document. But as she flipped forward, the entries changed. September 15th, applied treatment 9 p.m., patient restless as expected. September 18th, dosage increased per instructions, response intensified. September 22nd, skin reaction progressing according to timeline, patient exhibiting expected distress. Patient, not baby, not Bryant. Patient, dosage, timeline. Expected distress. Clara photographed page after page, her hands steady now with cold fury. This wasn't caregiving. This was an experiment. Someone was using Bryant like a lab rat, documenting his suffering with clinical detachment. The pieces clicked together in her mind like a lock opening. 9 p.m. treatment. 9:47 p.m. screaming. Exactly 1 hour later, every single night. The gel was causing the welts, the pain, the agony. But whose instructions was Ms. Hensworth following? Dr. Marlowe? William? Someone else? The sound of tires on gravel shattered her thoughts. Clara's head snapped toward the window. The Mercedes was pulling up the driveway, 30 minutes earlier than expected. Her pulse exploded. She shoved the journal back into the drawer, grabbed her phone, and ran for the door. The hallway stretched endlessly before her. She could hear voices downstairs, William's deep timbre, Catherine's softer response, footsteps on marble, coming closer. Clara rushed toward the servants' staircase, but froze when a door opened ahead of her. Ms. Hensworth stepped into the hallway, still wearing her coat. Her sharp eyes locked onto Clara immediately, assessing, calculating. "Shouldn't you be downstairs, Clara?" The nanny's voice was silk wrapped around steel. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. "Just checking if the nursery needs cleaning, ma'am." Ms. Hensworth's gaze traveled from Clara's face to the phone clutched in her hand, then back up. A small smile touched her lips, not friendly, knowing. "I'm sure it's fine." They stood there for 3 heartbeats, predator and prey, both understanding that the game had changed. "Of course, ma'am," Clara managed, forcing her feet to move past the nanny, down the hallway, toward the stairs. She could feel Ms. Hensworth's eyes boring into her back the entire way. And Clara knew with absolute certainty she'd been noticed. The clock was ticking now. Whatever she was going to do, she had to do it fast. Over the next 3 days, Clara felt eyes on her constantly. Ms. Hensworth appeared in doorways without warning, materializing like a shadow whenever Clara turned a corner. The nanny watched her dust the banister, observed her mopping the kitchen floor, stood silently in hallways Clara needed to pass through, always watching, always assessing. "You seem nervous, Clara," Ms. Hensworth said on the second day, her voice pleasant but her eyes sharp as broken glass. "Is everything all right?" "Fine, ma'am," Clara replied, gripping her cleaning supplies tighter. "Just try and do a good job." "Of course." That knowing smile again. "We all want to do our jobs well, don't we?" Clara couldn't tell if she was being watched or if paranoia was making her imagine threats in every glance, every question. But the nightly pattern continued with mechanical precision. 9 p.m. Ms. Hensworth disappeared into the nursery. 9:47 p.m. Bryant's screams began. Like clockwork, like torture scheduled by appointment. On the third night, Clara made her decision. She needed to see exactly what Ms. Hensworth was doing to that baby. At 8:45 p.m., while the nanny was downstairs having dinner, Clara slipped into the linen closet across from the nursery. The space was cramped, smelling of lavender detergent and cedar, shelves packed with expensive sheets and towels. She left the door cracked just enough to see, then waited in the darkness, her phone silenced, her breathing shallow. 9 p.m. exactly. Ms. Hensworth's footsteps approached, measured and unhurried. The nanny entered the nursery carrying a small black bag, the kind doctors use for house calls. Through the crack in the door, Clara watched as Ms. Hensworth set the bag on the changing table with methodical precision. She pulled out supplies, the amber bottle, cotton swabs, latex gloves, a small notebook, everything laid out like surgical instruments. Bryant stirred in his crib, making soft baby sounds. Ms. Hensworth lifted him with practiced efficiency. No warmth, no cooing, just mechanical movement. She laid him on the changing table and lifted his shirt. Clara's stomach turned as she watched the nanny pull on the latex gloves, unscrew the amber bottle, dip a cotton swab into the gel. Ms. Hensworth applied it in a deliberate pattern across Bryant's stomach, matching exactly where the welt had been. Precise circles, measured strokes, like painting hurt onto innocent skin. Bryant began to cry, small sounds of discomfort that made Clara's hands clench into fists. Ms. Hensworth's face remained completely emotionless. She wasn't cruel. Clara realized with horror. She was clinical, detached, treating this baby like a lab specimen, documenting an experiment with professional distance. The nanny made notes in her book, checked her watch, applied one more swab of gel. Then she redressed Bryant, placed him back in the crib, packed up her supplies, and left. Clara waited in the closet for 30 agonizing minutes, listening to Bryant's cries escalate from whimpers to full screams. At 9:47 p.m., exactly 1 hour after the application, his agony peaked. When she finally slipped into the nursery, Bryant's face was scarlet with screaming, his tiny body rigid with pain. The places where the gel had been applied were already turning red. Welts beginning to rise like the skin was burning from the inside out. "I'm so sorry, baby," Clara whispered, dampening a soft cloth with warm water. She gently dabbed at his stomach, trying to wash away whatever poison Miss Hensworth had applied. Bryant's screams quieted slightly at her touch, his desperate eyes finding hers like she was the only person in the world who cared he was suffering. Clara pulled out her phone with shaking hands and photographed everything. The fresh welts, the pattern of application, the redness spreading across his delicate skin. Evidence. Proof. Truth that couldn't be denied. She was so focused on the photos that she didn't hear the footsteps in the hallway until it was too late. Working late, are we? Clara spun around, phone clutched behind her back. William Smith stood in the doorway, still wearing his business suit, a tumbler of bourbon in his hand. His eyes were cold, calculating, assessing her like she was a problem that needed solving. "Just heard the baby crying, sir," Clara managed, her voice somehow steady. Wanted to make sure he was all right. How thoughtful. William stepped into the nursery, and Clara felt the temperature drop. "You're the new girl. Clara, isn't it? How are you finding things here?" "Fine, sir. The family has been very welcoming." "Good." He moved closer, and Clara instinctively stepped back, her phone pressed against her spine. "We value discretion in our staff, Clara. Privacy. Loyalty. I trust you understand that." It wasn't a question. It was a threat wrapped in expensive words. "Of course, sir." William's gaze swept over her, lingering on the way she held her hands behind her back. He knew. Maybe not exactly what she discovered, but he knew she was a problem. Excellent. I'd hate to lose someone so dedicated. He left without another word, taking his bourbon and his subtle menace with him. Clara waited until his footsteps faded before she ran to her small staff room in the basement. Her hands shook as she locked the door, pulled out her phone, began uploading the photos to a cloud account. She needed backups, evidence that couldn't be destroyed if they took her phone. The text message came through as she was finishing. "Stop snooping or you'll regret it. Unknown number. Sent 2 minutes ago, while she was still upstairs." Clara's blood ran cold. Who sent it? Ms. Hensworth, who'd noticed Clara watching. William, who'd just caught her in the nursery. Someone else she hadn't even identified yet. She stared at the threatening words glowing on her screen, her heart hammering, fear screaming at her to quit this job and run far away. But then she thought of Bryant's face, scarlet with agony, his tiny fists clenched in pain, his desperate eyes finding hers in the darkness. She'd come too far to stop now. Whatever happened next, she had to see this through. The threat should have scared Clara away. Instead, it made her more determined. Whoever sent that message was afraid of what she might find, which meant there was something to find. For the next 2 days, Clara became a shadow with a purpose. She cleaned with meticulous attention, always watching, always listening, always looking for opportunities. William's study had been off limits. Mrs. Winters made that clear on Clara's first day. Mr. Smith values his privacy. Only dusts when he's present and gives permission. But Wednesday morning, William left for a business meeting in the city. Catherine was at a spa appointment. Ms. Hensworth had taken Bryant to a doctor's visit, Dr. Marlowe's office, naturally. The house was as empty as it would ever be. Clara stood outside the study door for 30 seconds, her hand on the brass handle, giving herself one last chance to walk away. Then she thought of Bryant's welts and pushed the door open. William's domain reeked of old money and older privilege. Leather wingback chairs the color of dried blood. floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with first editions that had never been read, a mahogany desk big enough to land a plane on, crystal decanters of whiskey that cost more than Clara's monthly rent, everything designed to intimidate, to remind anyone who entered that William Smith was a man of power and consequence. Clara moved quickly to the filing cabinet behind his desk. The top drawer held business correspondence, contracts, legal documents from Smith Industries. She photographed page after page while keeping one ear tuned for any sound of returning cars. The second drawer made her freeze. There, in a manila folder labeled personal insurance, was a life insurance policy. Clara pulled it out with trembling hands, her eyes scanning the document, her brain struggling to process what she was seeing. Policyholder, William Harrison Smith Insured Party. Bryant William Smith, date of birth. January 15, 2025, age. 8 months benefit amount. $5 million policy effective date. September 1st, 2025. $5 million. On an 8-month-old baby. The policy had been taken out 6 weeks ago, right before Clara started working at the estate. Beneficiary, William Harrison Smith. Clara's hand shook as she photographed every page. Who took out a $5 million life insurance policy on an infant? Who stood to gain that much money if a baby died? She dug deeper into the drawer, finding bank statements that told a story William Smith clearly wanted hidden. Smith Industries was hemorrhaging money. Contracts canceled, investors pulling out, quarterly losses in the millions. There were foreclosure warnings on 3 properties, debt collection notices, desperate emails to banks requesting extensions on loans. The Smith family wealth was a facade. They were drowning in debt, months away from losing everything. The mansion, the cars, the designer clothes, all mortgaged to the hilt, barred against a future that was collapsing. And Bryant's insurance policy would solve all of it. $5 million to save William's empire. All it would cost was a baby's life. Clara's stomach turned as the pieces clicked into place. This wasn't just abuse. This was premeditated murder disguised as mysterious illness. Make Bryant sick enough, document his condition with a corrupt doctor, then let him die. Natural causes. Tragic loss. Insurance payout. Problem solved. She was photographing the last bank statement when she heard voices in the hallway. Can't keep doing this, Mother. Catherine's voice, thick with tears. He's my baby. Clara's heart stopped. She looked around frantically. No time to reach the door. She dove behind the floor-length curtains just as Catherine entered the study. Phone pressed her ear. You knew what you were marrying into. A woman's voice said from the speaker, cold and sharp. Catherine's mother. The Smith family legacy matters more than your maternal instincts. But he's suffering. Catherine's voice broke. Every night I hear him scream, and I do nothing. I'm his mother, and I do nothing. Clara pressed herself against the wall, barely breathing. Phone clutched in her sweaty palm. William knows what he's doing, the mother continued, unmoved by her daughter's tears. Dr. Marlowe assured us the treatment is necessary. Brian will be fine. Will he? Catherine's voice was hollow. Or will he be dead, and we'll all pretend we did everything we could? Silence. Then, don't be dramatic, Catherine. You're upset. Take one of your pills and rest. This will all be over soon. The call ended. Clara watched through a gap in the curtain as Catherine stood in the middle of the study, crying silently, her whole body shaking. For a moment, Clara thought she might confide in someone, call the police, do something. But Catherine just wiped her eyes, straightened her designer dress, and left the room like a woman walking to her own execution. Clara waited 5 full minutes before emerging from behind the curtain. Her legs felt like water, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. She photographed the insurance policy one more time, the bank statements, everything that proved William's motive. Then she carefully returned everything to exactly where she'd found it. This wasn't just about one sick baby anymore. This was about money, legacy, maintaining appearances at any cost. 2 families, the Smiths and Catherine's family, both willing to sacrifice Bryant to preserve their status, their wealth, their precious reputations. Bryant was worth more dead than alive to these people, and they were going to kill him, document it carefully with their corrupt doctor, and call it natural causes. Clara gripped her phone, feeling the weight of the evidence she'd gathered. Photos of welts, mysterious gel daily logs, insurance policies, financial ruin. She had proof now, real proof. But proof meant nothing without someone willing to believe her, and she was running out of time. Dr. Marlowe arrived every Friday at 3 p.m., black medical bag in hand. Smile practiced and professional. This Friday, Clara was ready. She'd spent her lunch breaks all week researching him on her phone, hiding in her basement room, while scrolling through search results. What she found made her blood run cold. Dr. Gregory Marlowe wasn't a pediatrician. He was a dermatologist. And 2 years ago, he'd lost his hospital privileges for experimental treatments that violated ethical guidelines. The news article was still online, archived but accessible. Dr. Gregory Marlowe suspended for unauthorized chemical applications on patients. The details made Clara's stomach turn. He'd been conducting cosmetic research, applying topical agents to patients without proper consent, deliberately causing skin reactions to test new chemical compounds. The hospital board had called it unconscionable breach of medical ethics. He kept his license but lost his position, his reputation, his legitimate practice. Now he was here, treating an 8-month-old baby with the same experimental chemicals. Except this time, the goal wasn't research. It was murder disguised as mystery illness. At 2:45 p.m., Clara positioned herself in the second-floor hallway, pretending to dust a table that didn't need dusting. She watched through the window as Dr. Marlowe's silver BMW pulled up the circular driveway right on schedule. William met him at the door personally, unusual for a man who barely acknowledged his household staff. The greeting was warm, familiar, the handshake of old friends or co-conspirators. They spoke in low voices as they climbed the stairs, their conversation too quiet to hear until they were nearly past Clara. "Progressing well," Dr. Marlowe was saying. "The documentation is comprehensive." "Good," William replied. "Catherine is asking questions. We need to move forward." They entered the nursery together. Clara waited 30 seconds, then crept closer, her heart hammering. She pressed herself against the wall beside the door, which William had left slightly ajar. "How much longer?" William's voice, sharp with impatience. "The screaming is drawing attention. Even the staff are noticing. The progression must appear natural, William." Dr. Marlowe's tone was patient, lecturing. "Rush it, and the insurance company investigates. We need a clear timeline of deterioration. Medical records showing we tried everything, consulted specialists, exhausted all options." "Catherine is becoming unstable," William said, frustration bleeding through. "She questions me constantly. Last night, she threatened to take Bryant to a real hospital. Control your wife." Dr. Marlowe's voice hardened. "We're too close to let sentiment derail everything. You owe me a considerable sum for the service, and I intend to collect. If Catherine becomes a problem, handle it." Clara heard rustling, then Bryant's small whimper as he was lifted from his crib. "Let me examine him." Dr. Marlowe's voice shifted to clinical detachment. "Ah, yes. The reaction is progressing perfectly. See here, William. The dermis is showing exactly the inflammatory response we need. In 6 weeks, maybe 8, his system will be sufficiently compromised." Clara risked peering through the crack in the door. Dr. Marlowe bent over Bryant on the changing table, examining the welts with the satisfied expression of a scientist reviewing successful lab results. He pulled out a small camera, photographing the marks. Then he took samples with cotton swabs, sealing them in plastic bags, documenting everything with meticulous care. William stood beside him, staring down at his own son with eyes colder than winter frost. No concern, no fatherly love, just calculation, measuring the profit margin on an infant's life. "His weight is down another pound," Dr. Marlowe noted, making entries in a leather journal. "Decreased appetite, chronic pain response, weakened immune system, all documented. The progression is textbook." "Textbook for what?" William asked. "Failure to thrive with unknown etiology. By the time we're finished, every medical record will show a baby who mysteriously deteriorated despite our best efforts. The insurance company won't question it. They'll pay out within 6 weeks of the death certificate. Bryant began to cry, weak, exhausted sound that tore at Clara's heart. Neither man moved to comfort him. "Increase the dosage," William said. "I want this finished." "Patience," Dr. Marlowe cautioned, but he was already pulling out the amber bottle, preparing a fresh application. 6 weeks, William. Maybe less if we're fortunate. But we cannot rush perfection. They stayed in the nursery another 10 minutes. Dr. Marlowe applying his poison with practiced precision, while William watched like a man supervising a business transaction. Because that's all this was to him. Business. His son's life reduced to a line item on a balance sheet. When they finally emerged, Clara was 20 feet down the hall, polishing a mirror with desperate focus. They walked past her, still talking in low voices. "The help seems quite attentive," Dr. Marlowe observed, glancing back at Clara. William's jaw tightened. "Too attentive. The new girl asks questions, hovers around the nursery. I may need to make changes to our staff. Sooner rather than later, I'd suggest. Loose ends are dangerous, William, especially ones who might develop a conscience." Their voices faded as they descended the stairs. Clara stood frozen, her reflection staring back at her from the polished mirror, her face pale with terror and rage. They were planning to fire her. Maybe worse than fire her, depending on what William meant by changes and loose ends. She had maybe a week before they acted, and Bryant had maybe 6 weeks before the treatment killed him, before he became another tragic statistic, another mysterious infant death that would make the insurance company write a $5 million check. Clara's hands clenched around her polishing cloth. 6 weeks. 1 week. Time running out for both of them. She had to act now, before William silenced her, before Dr. Marlowe's poison finished its work, before Bryant's suffering became just another secret buried in this beautiful, terrible house. On her 35th night in the Smith house, Clara made a decision. She would document everything, gather irrefutable evidence, and then go to the authorities with a case so airtight they couldn't ignore it. She knew the odds. Black domestic worker versus wealthy white family. Her word against theirs. Even with photos, they claimed she was disgruntled, trying to extort money, making wild accusations. She needed more than suspicions and blurry pictures. She needed proof so damning that no amount of money or influence could explain it away. At 8:45 p.m., Clara slipped into the nursery. Bryant slept fitfully in his crib, small whimpers escaping with each breath. She pulled her phone from her pocket, hands trembling as she positioned it inside a large stuffed elephant on the shelf directly across from the changing table. The camera lens peered through the elephant's eye, aimed perfectly at where Ms. Hensworth would perform her nightly ritual. Clara adjusted it twice, making sure the angle captured everything, then retreated to the hallway closet. Through the crack in the door, she watched and waited. At exactly 9 p.m., Ms. Hensworth arrived, amber bottle in hand. Clara held her breath as the nanny lifted Bryant from his crib, laid him on the changing table, and began the treatment. Every deliberate application of gel, every clinical stroke across Bryant's stomach, every cry of pain from the baby met with emotionless detachment. It lasted 8 minutes. 8 minutes of documented horror. When Ms. Hensworth finally left, Clara waited another 5 minutes before retrieving her phone. Her hand shook so badly she nearly dropped it. But there was video evidence of deliberate child abuse. Clear, undeniable, irrefutable. She backed up the file immediately, emailing it to herself, saving it to cloud storage. Tomorrow, she'd take it to police. Tonight, she secured Bryant's salvation. But first, she needed to tell Catherine. She found the woman in her bedroom, sitting on the edge of her bed, a pill bottle in her trembling hands. Catherine looked up as Clara entered, her eyes red-rimmed and hollow. "I can't watch him suffer anymore," Catherine whispered. Clara closed the door behind her. "I know what they're doing to Bryant. The gel, the insurance policy, all of it." Catherine's face crumpled. The confession poured out like poison from a wound. William's financial ruin. The pressure from both families to solve the problem. Dr. Marlowe's scheme of slow poisoning disguised as mysterious illness. Catherine's own trap position. The prenuptial agreement that left her penniless. the custody laws that favored wealthy fathers, her family's refusal to help because they valued the Smith connection more than her happiness. "I'm a coward," Catherine sobbed. "I chose comfort over my own child life." "You're choosing now," Clara said. "That's what matters." Catherine stood on shaking legs, walked to her closet, and pulled out a small leather diary from behind shoe boxes. "I've been documenting everything. Dates, conversations, things William said when he thought I wasn't listening. I was too afraid to act." She pressed the diary into Clara's hands. "But maybe together—" "Tomorrow," Clara said firmly. "You keep William distracted. I'll take everything to the police." "Will—" "Ladies, it's quite late for a chat." Both women froze. Ms. Hensworth stood in the doorway, her eyes sharp and knowing. "Mrs. Smith, perhaps you need one of your pills. You seem agitated." The nanny's voice dripped false concern. Her gaze shifted to Clara. "And you should return to your quarters. Immediately." Clara clutched the diary against her chest and walked past Ms. Hensworth, feeling those cold eyes boring into her back. In her small basement room, Clara hid the diary and phone under a loose floorboard. Her heart hammered as she heard footsteps overhead, raised voices. Then her door handle turned, locked from the outside. Clara ran to it, pulling, rattling. Solid. Trapped. Through the door came Catherine screaming, William's angry voice, sounds of commotion. Clara pressed her ear to the wood. "We're accelerating the timeline. Tomorrow." William's words, cold and final. Clara grabbed her phone. No signal in the basement. She tried 911 anyway. Nothing. Just a loading circle spinning uselessly. She sank to the floor, one thought burning through her terror. Bryant has hours, not days. Clara kicked at her locked door until her foot ached, but the solid oak wouldn't budge. Through the wood, she heard the house settling into its nightly rhythms, but something was different tonight. Footsteps moving with purpose. Urgent whispers. The sound of Bryant crying, then suddenly silent. Too silent. Her basement room had one small window near the ceiling. Clara dragged her chair beneath it, climbed up, and pushed. The window groaned open, revealing a narrow gap barely wide enough for her body. Beyond it, a drain pipe ran down the mansion's exterior wall. She didn't let herself think. Thinking meant fear, and fear meant paralysis. She squeezed through the window, her shirt catching on the frame, and grabbed the drain pipe with both hands. The metal was cold and slick, 20 feet down to the ground. One slip, and she'd break her neck. Clara wrapped her legs around the pipe and began descending, inch by terrifying inch. The pipe groaned under her weight, bolts straining against brick. 10 feet, 5 feet. Her hands burned, muscles screaming. She dropped the last 4 feet, landing hard on the grass. No time to recover. She ran to the kitchen door, unlocked, as always for staff access, and slipped inside. The house was dark, except for a light upstairs. The nursery. Clara took the stairs 2 at a time, her heart hammering against her ribs. At the nursery door, she froze. Ms. Hensworth stood over Bryant's changing table, the amber bottle in hand. But this time, the dose was massive. Nearly half the bottle poured into her palm, thick gel pooling like poison. "Stop." Clara burst through the door. Ms. Hensworth looked up, unsurprised. "Clara, I was wondering when you'd arrive." She held the gel-coated hand over Bryant's exposed stomach. "Nothing personal, Clara. Just business. The Smiths pay very well. Very well indeed. You're killing him for money? I'm doing a job." Ms. Hensworth's voice was flat, matter-of-fact. "My nursing license was revoked 3 years ago. Malpractice, they called it. I call it bad luck. Either way, legitimate work dried up. When William found me, he offered triple salary for specialized care. I didn't ask questions." "He's a baby," Clara said, stepping closer. "He's 8 months old." "He's a paycheck," Ms. Hensworth applied, lowering her hand toward Bryant's skin. "Now, if you'll excuse me." Clara tackled her. They crashed into the rocking chair, Ms. Hensworth's hand smearing gel across the floor instead of Bryant's stomach. The nanny was stronger than she looked, years of lifting patience giving her solid muscle. She grabbed Clara's hair, yanking hard. Clara drove her elbow into the woman's ribs. Bryant began screaming. The sound brought footsteps running. William appeared in the doorway, Catherine behind him. Clara broke free, lunged for Bryant, and scooped him into her arms. She backed against the wall. The baby clutched to her chest. "Don't come near him." "Give me my son, Clara." William's voice was ice. "Calm, calculating. So you can kill him for insurance money?" Clara's voice shook but held firm. "I have evidence. Photos, recordings, everything. Dr. Marlowe's visits. The gel. All of it." William smiled. Actually smiled. "You're a maid who broke into my house, attacked my son's nanny, and tried to kidnap my child. Who will they believe, Clara? Me, a respected businessman, or you?" He took a step forward. "I have lawyers. I have connections. I have money. What do you have?" The critical moment hung suspended. Then Catherine stepped forward. "They'll believe his mother." William turned, genuine surprise crossing his face. Catherine pulled out her phone. "I've been recording our conversations, William, including tonight's discussion about accelerating the timeline." Her voice grew stronger with each word. "Every threat, every plan, every cold calculation about our son's worth dead versus alive. Catherine, you won't touch our son again." Catherine's transformation was complete. From broken victim, protective mother, she looked at Clara. "I called 911 20 minutes ago. They're coming." As if summoned, sirens wailed outside. Ms. Hensworth bolted for the door. She made it to the stairs before two police officers caught her, forcing her against the wall. More officers poured through the entrance. "We received a report of child endangerment." Clara handed over her phone. Catherine gave them her recordings. William stood frozen, his carefully constructed world crumbling. His lawyer arrived within minutes, but the evidence was overwhelming, undeniable. Paramedics took Bryant from Clara's arms, Catherine following as they carried him to the ambulance. Dr. Marlowe was called in for questioning, his name already on the warrant. The conspiracy unraveled in real time, thread by thread, lie by lie. Clara gave her statement to a detective whose kind eyes told her she was believed. "If you hadn't acted tonight," he said quietly, "this baby would be dead by morning. You saved his life." Clara nodded, exhaustion and relief and trauma hitting simultaneously. Through the window, police car lights painted the mansion red and blue, destroying its perfect facade. The beautiful, terrible house was finally exposed for what it truly was. 3 months later, Clara sat in a courthouse hallway, waiting to testify. Through the window, she could see Bryant in Catherine's arms, healthy, laughing, alive. The transformation was miraculous. Color in his cheeks, weight on his tiny frame, the kind of gurgling baby sounds that spoke of contentment instead of agony. The trial had lasted 2 weeks. Clara's photos, Catherine's diary, the video recording, all presented as evidence. Medical examiners testified that Bryant's stomach showed chemical burns consistent with deliberate application of caustic substances. Toxicology reports revealed the gel contained compounds designed to cause progressive organ failure while mimicking natural illness. The verdicts came swift and final. Dr. Marlowe, 15 years for conspiracy to commit murder and medical malpractice. Ms. Hensworth, 10 years for assault on a minor and conspiracy. William Smith, 25 years to life for attempted murder, insurance fraud, and child endangerment. Catherine faced no charges. The prosecution deemed her a victim of coercive control who'd ultimately turned state's evidence and saved her son's life. Medical testimony confirmed Bryant would make a full recovery. His pediatrician had stated plainly, another week, maybe 2, and the chemicals would have caused irreversible organ failure. This child would be dead. But he wasn't dead. He was alive, reaching for his mother with chubby hands, recognizing Clara with a smile that melted her heart every time. When Clara took the stand, the defense attorney tried his rehearsed tactics. "You're just a maid, Ms. Washington. Why should this jury believe you over a respected businessman?" Clara looked him directly in the eye. "Because I was the only one who chose to see that baby as a person worth saving. The jury's reaction was visible. Hands pressed to mouths, eyes glistening. Several jurors nodded. The judge commended her before she left the stand. Ms. Washington's courage prevented a heinous crime. This court recognizes her extraordinary bravery. Clara was obviously fired from the Smith household, but it didn't matter. Catherine had given her a substantial financial gift, enough to live on while she figured out what came next. Catherine herself was moving away from both families, starting fresh with Bryant in a small town where no one knew the Smith name. Therapy helps, Catherine told Clara in a private moment before leaving the courthouse. I'm finding my voice, becoming the mother Bryant deserves. She squeezed Clara's hand. You saved his life. You saved mine too. Showed me what real courage looks like. You found your own courage when it mattered, Clara replied. They looked at each other, two women trapped by different systems, freed by shared humanity. The racial and class lines that had divided them dissolved in the face of something more fundamental, a mother's love and a stranger's compassion. Clara found her new path quickly. A child protective advocacy nonprofit offered her a position helping domestic workers recognize signs of abuse. She gave speaking engagements, taught others to trust their instincts, to act when children were in danger. Her trauma had found higher purpose. 1 year later, Clara attended Bryant's first birthday party. It was a small gathering, Catherine, Bryant, Clara, a few close friends. No family members. No cold marble halls or expensive silence. Just a modest apartment filled with warmth, laughter, and brightly colored balloons. Bryant was walking now, toddling unsteadily across the carpet. When he saw Clara, his face lit up. "Say what?" he shouted, one of his first words, and reached for her. Clara scooped him up, feeling his solid weight, his healthy warmth. The contrast to that night in the nursery was almost unbearable. Then he'd been dying. Now he was thriving. Every night he sleeps peacefully now, Catherine said softly, watching them. No screaming, just dreams. Clara held Bryant close, watching him play with her earring, and reflected on the journey. The terror, the courage, the justice finally served. This child had been a helpless victim. Now he was alive, whole, surrounded by love. Sometimes the person with the least power has the greatest strength, because they have nothing to lose except their humanity, and everything to gain by protecting someone else's. Clara had been just a maid in a mansion full of secrets and lies. But when she looked at a dying baby and chose to see a life worth saving, she became something far more powerful. She became the person who cared. And in the end, that was enough. That was everything. Real courage isn't about being fearless. It's about being terrified and acting anyway because something bigger than your fear demands it. Every child deserves someone who will fight for them, regardless of the cost. Clara Washington had been that someone for Bryant Smith. And because of her, he would grow up knowing that even in the darkest places, there are still people who choose to see the light. If this story touched your heart, smash that like button right now. Subscribe so you never miss stories about real courage and everyday heroes. And hit that notification bell. Our next story will shock you. One person can change everything. See you in the next video.